CapeTalk listeners have been talking about the prospect of Olympic bids for as long as I've been hosting a show and for many, many years before that as well. Why are we reintroducing the subject today? Well, because last week our Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, Gayton McKenzie, met with the International Olympic Committee in Lausanne, Switzerland. And after that meeting, he said, and I quote, "We are at the start of an exciting new process that could lead to South Africa hosting the 2036 Olympic Games." Now, of course, Cape Town's last Olympic bid was for the 2004 Games that went to Athens. But speculation had been growing even before this comment from the minister about a renewed effort for 2040. While the city hasn't confirmed any plans, many believe Cape Town does have the infrastructure and the potential to become the first African city to host the Games. I have to say our listener response has been almost entirely anti the prospect, simply saying we cannot afford it. We can't afford to have this financial albatross around our neck when there is still so much that needs fixing in the basics of how we live in South Africa. I'd say probably 97% of the responses today have been something along that line. But our next guest is somebody who has applied thought to the concept from a perspective of how a bid for the Games could be used to drive positive change for the city and sustainable development. He's part of think tank Cape Town 2040, led by architect and urban designer Guy Briggs, with Rashik Fatah, who is CEO of Our Future Cities. And it's a pleasure to have Guy Briggs with us on the line. Guy, thanks for your time this morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Pippa. Thank you for inviting me to come on.
It's a pleasure. Is it even possible? I mean, based on the research you've already done, how far away are we as a city from being able to come anywhere close to meeting the kind of infrastructure requirements that one needs to host an Olympics?
Well, we're a lot closer than people would think.
Really?
And there are two fundamental reasons for that. Firstly, the way that the Olympics is hosted now globally has changed over the last couple of games, and there's a far greater emphasis on the developmental needs of the host city and making use of what's there. And the study that Rashik and I put together has demonstrated that we've got some 84% of the sports venues already in place, potentially needing some minor upgrades here and there. There would be inevitably some additional spend needed. But I think the other key reason is that one thing about bidding for Games is that you get a long lead-in time. We'd have 10 to 12 years to prepare, and it gives you a focus, and it marshals resources from all sorts of avenues: national government, provincial government, private sector, and frankly, we can do it.
You sound confident. I'm looking, Guy, at a list of the cost of the previous couple of games. $28 billion US, what it cost Tokyo, 21 billion, Sochi, 15 billion, London for 2012. Can we justify spending that amount of money on a sporting spectacle when we have children who still don't have functioning toilets at their schools? We have people going hungry and people without housing. How do you make those sums balance?
Well, I think the key thing is we're not spending it on a sporting spectacle. The sporting spectacle is kind of the thing we get, the most visible aspect that we get out of it. But frankly, what we're spending money on is infrastructure, housing, economic development, and job creation. And if one thinks of it like that, the great spectacle that is the Olympic Games is kind of the icing on the cake. But really what we're doing is we're bringing a massive focus on economic growth. For Cape Town in particular, if we manage to convince people to host it here, but for the Western Cape more generally, the other thing about a Games now is that one tends to spread the impact, make it work across a much broader level. And there are two reasons for that, because there are, of course, negative impacts. You get a lot of traffic, you get a lot of influx of people. Yes, it costs. So the more that we can spread the negative impacts, the better. But there are the huge positive impacts that come with it. And the more that we can share those, the more positive we get out of the whole event.
Guy, you've been researching with the concept of a 2040 Games in mind. Were you taken by surprise by the minister's comments that 2036 is already on the table?
Um, Slightly, I must confess, but only in the best possible way. Um, there's no reason we shouldn't aim for 2036. 2036 is the first opportunity that's on the table. 2028 has been already awarded to Los Angeles, and 2032 is going to Brisbane and the Gold Coast. So 2036 is the next available. Why did we pick 2040? Two reasons. One, it seemed realistic. 2036 may be a little too ambitious. 2040 would be the fallback. The other reason, to be perfectly honest with you, is that CT2040 looks much better as a logo than CT2036.
Okay. So the marketers will have an easier time of
We're,
it.
we're architects and urbanists, so we're visual people.
Okay. Guy, thanks for planting some food for thought there. Guy Briggs, the architect and urban designer who is leading the think tank Cape Town 2040, making the argument that there is very definite potential benefit to hosting an event like the Olympics in terms of the infrastructure that will come with it. Of course, the big question mark is how much of the money allocated to build that infrastructure disappears into the feeding trough of corruption. That's a book we've read before with the 2010 Soccer World Cup. I know that is something a lot of people are voicing concern about. Thank you guys so much for your interesting input. I'd love to hear listeners' response.